Happy New Year, everybody. Today we're going to take a look around the American League Central, talk about the outlook for 2024, as well as the future of the division as a whole. All today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, January 1st, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Alrighty, everybody. Well, welcome back. Hope everyone had a fantastic and safe New Year's Eve. Happy New Year's Day to all. So today, first off, timing of this episode is going to be weird. There's really no point in me to wait until Tuesday night, and it's New Year's at about 2 p.m. Eastern time, 2:30 Eastern time. So I am just going to do this and then immediately upload it and just throw it up. So you do have a New Year's Day episode. Obviously, New Year's Eve had a very, very busy afternoon into obviously late into the evening. So did not have a chance to record yesterday. But again, there's really no point in waiting until midnight. Like, nothing's going to happen on the evening. I'm going to jinx it now and something is going to happen. But like, nothing's going to happen in the next, 10 hours. So I'm just going to throw it up, and it's going to be a weirdly timed New Year's Day, random middle of the afternoon episode. So I apologize for the weird timing there, but we'll get back on the horse. And, when Wednesday we'll have a new episode that'll be up on midnight, and then so forth, back to regularly scheduled programming from here on out. But did want to kind of set the scene there and kind of explain the scheduling for that. Like I said, hope everyone had a safe and fun New Year's Eve. Today we're going to talk about the American League Central in 2024. I think that when the calendar year flips over is a very nice time to kind of, you're at a ledge where you can just kind of relax and take a deep breath and realize, what the Tigers have done this offseason. We've talked about that aplenty, obviously. We did New Year's resolutions at the end of last week, right? And I think that today is kind of a unique opportunity where we can talk about what everyone else in the division has done. I think that there have been some teams in the American League Central that have been very quiet, and that is something that is notable and that we are certainly going to talk about because they're teams that are directly competing with the Detroit Tigers for this division. And then we also have teams that have been a lot more active. And the Tigers, for as much as there has been some frustration about a lack of a huge splash, as far as just quantity of moves, have actually been one of the most active teams, not only in the Central, but in the entire American League in baseball. So we will talk about that today. We're just going to go team by team, just talk about kind of where they stand in 2024 as the calendar year flips over. What do I expect out of the American League Central in 2024? And then obviously would love to hear where y'all's head is at with this division as well. Goodness, can't speak. It was a long night. So let's start with the Royals, right? Let's start with the Royals. The Royals last year were absolutely dreadful. And I don't think that they got nearly enough heat for how poor they were on the field. This is a team that, legitimately was neck and neck with the Oakland A's for a large majority of the season. And the A's got all the heat because their owner sucks and nobody likes him. And the move and the reverse boycott and the fans and everything. And that's all justified and well. But right around the corner in our own division was a team that was almost just as dreadful as the Oakland Athletics. The only glimmer of hope the Royals really had this season, and they had some injuries too. I'm not just trying to dogpile on the Royals for no reason. They had some injuries too and whatnot. was the emergence of Bobby Witt Jr. After his rookie year, I was super skeptical, like very admittedly, about him after his rookie season, and he took big steps forward this past year. And as the year went along, especially, it looked like he got more and more confident. He is going to be a legitimate like speed. I mean, we saw it when we played the Royals, right? Like we played the Royals, and there were a few games where we just got diced by pitchers that nobody even like remembers, right? If you were to ask them today, but which is obviously frustrating. But Bobby Witt Jr. had one game in particular I remember where I think he beat out an infield single and then stole second and maybe even stole third, but he at least stole second and then scored. And it's just like, man, like he doesn't even need to be hitting the ball really well or making really good contact to be an absolute difference maker for this team on a game-to-game basis. And so they have that going for them, which is great. Good for you. Outside of that, it's very bleak. Now, this offseason, they have actually ponied up a little bit and spent some money. And I am always pro teams spending money on free agents. That is only good for the game in my eyes. So I'm glad that they are doing something. The moves that they are making, I don't think any of them are so significant as to where all the teams in the AL Central are looking and they're like, oh my goodness, like the Royals are coming. I don't think that it's to that extent. I think that they are still either the fourth or fifth best team in this division. We'll talk about the White Sox here in a second. They've certainly had an interesting last calendar year. Wow, lighting is way better today, eh? Maybe it's just a little cloudy. But the Royals, again, I'm glad they're spending money. That's all fine and dandy, but they're not on my radar of teams that I'm like worried about and whatnot for the Tigers in 2024. The Tigers also had a fantastic record against the American League Central, which I think is important to bring up. They were stellar. We talked about that a lot during the regular season. They dominated, to be honest. Like that really is the word. They absolutely dominated the American League Central, and then they were terrible and couldn't beat anybody in the American League East, and then were around 500 for pretty much every other division. And that led them to a just barely sub 500 record when it was all said and done. So I think starting with this last place team that did get better, like objectively, like they're not as bad as they were last year. The season could start tomorrow. That's another important thing. There's still moves to be made. This is not a finalized thing, right? There's still some free agents out there, and there's some moves that are going to still be made, probably within this division even, but certainly throughout the rest of baseball. So this is all subject to change a little bit, but as far as the Royals go, I still think they're either the fourth or fifth best team in this division. But looking at Bobby Witt Jr. and seeing the heights that he could reach, another big step forward potentially, we will certainly see the growth that he has. I mean, and again, they had some Sasquatch, right? They had some other. That's so funny. I remember playing the Royals, and they just literally have a Sasquatch just like walking on top of like the whatever that is out in left field, that building. It's funny. So yeah, man, I don't like the Royals very much. So I have a hard time being like, oh, I hope they're good. But I have nothing against their fan base or anything. Just the organization was a cause of a lot of pain for me growing up. But I think they really need to take some big steps forward with their player development. They also just desperately need some pitching to work out. And then we'll move on. I promise. I don't want to just talk about the Royals the whole time, but they are somewhat fascinating. The Royals were in a weird situation where during their rebuild, they did a similar thing to the Tigers. And I remember I have a buddy of mine who's a Royals fan, and we were talking smack to each other. This is probably like 3 or even 4 years ago now. And we were arguing about whose minor league rotation, right, like AA rotation or something like that, was better. Because the Royals went super pitcher heavy in their rebuild as well, and it just has not worked out whatsoever. Singer really struggled this past year. A lot of people think he could bounce back, though. Asa Lacy, for a phenomenal pitcher out of Texas A&M. It was one of the biggest names in the country. I loved watching him pitch in college. Just has been absolutely dreadful, unfortunately, as a professional They have a lot of pitching, just like flare outs. And that has been the biggest reason as to why they have been, a bottom of the barrel team in maybe the worst division in baseball for a long time now, years and years and years. So they're just desperately trying to see any movement on the meter. Just try to get out of last place, even if it's fourth place. That's at least some sign of life from the Royals. I think that's kind of what they're going for here, and that's why they're spending money. And I have no issue if they do that. I don't think they're going to be better than like fourth place, though. I think there's a pretty clear bottom two and top three in the American League Central, and I still think the Royals are in the bottom two. Let's get to the other team that's in the bottom two. We will do that right after I tell you all about our friends over at FanDuel. We talk about FanDuel all the time here, and the NFL regular season is wrapping up, so there's truly no better time to get in on the action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet as well. You have live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab, which is super fun. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays. So many more, just money lines, spreads. This is such a fun time in the NFL season. You have award races heating up. You have obviously you have people checking in as eligible, and then refs, not really sure what that word means. I mean, it's really just an electric time to be a football fan, especially if you live in the state of Texas. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, making us your first listen every day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back on Wednesday. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports today as well. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's here for you 24/7. Like I said, top stories from the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Okay, so we're talking about the American League Central here. The next team here, which I think this will be relatively quick. I say that all the time, and then I ramble for 15 minutes. I have a really bad habit of doing that. But genuinely, I don't think there's too much else to say about the Chicago White Sox other than they are absolutely intentionally imploding this entire thing. And I White Sox fans are not huge fans of yours truly, which understand. I've talked plenty about them over the years, but I think it's I have a lot of friends who are White Sox fans. I have no ill will towards the fan base whatsoever, and I genuinely, this is one where I do feel bad. I really do. For as much as they don't like me, I genuinely feel bad for this fan base. They went complete rebuild and had an just historic amount of top 100 prospects. They were deemed one of the best farm systems of the 21st century at one point. They were supposed to be the team of the future, this dynasty in the making. All these kids were coming up together through the system, and it was all for a playoff appearance, an expanded COVID season that nobody even really counts, and then one division title in 2021. And that was it. That was all those years of tanking and rebuilding and really being a bottom dweller team for one division title. And then it was right back down to the bottom. Obviously, we talked about Tony La Russa a lot in the past on this show because, there's a very widespread belief that the White Sox blew their chance at A.J. Hinch, and then he fell in the Tigers' lap, and now he's going to be the manager, presumably for the next. He's already been here for 3 or 4 years now, and is probably going to be here for the next, 5, maybe even. Just signed a contract extension this winter, and they're getting rid of everybody. They are completely trading away anybody. They're not re-signing people. They are going into full rebuild. And the thing that I think, and then again, we'll move on. I don't think there's too much else to say. The thing that really, I think, was the biggest slap in the face throughout this whole thing was the GM hiring process, I really do believe that. They were in a position where they could have they finally get rid of Rick Hahn, and they finally kind of gut this front office that has just been a rudderless ship ever since 2005. And well, I guess 2006, 2005 was obviously a great year for them. But ever since post World Series win in 2005, and I think they really did a disservice to everybody. It's just such a rough look to just make the hire as quick as possible with all the ties he already had to the organization. Like, I think everybody was kind of hoping for a fresh face over there, someone new, a new angle, new ideology, a fresh perspective on all the players they currently have, and I'm not sure they really got that. So I don't expect the White Sox to be competitive really at all. It's going to be Luis Robert Jr. and not a whole lot else, and that is what I expect the White Sox to be. They're going to be down there in fourth or fifth place in the Central. The top three is where this really gets interesting. It's almost certainly, and I could, be wearing pie on my face here. And a year from now, the Royals are just like the team of destiny, or the White Sox for some reason aren't terrible. But I am going into this season under the impression that this is going to be a three-man race between the Guardians, the Tigers, and the White Sox. The Tigers we're going to save for last. We talk about the Tigers all the time here, so we don't need to do an entire, 20 minutes on the Tigers offseason because we talk about them literally every day. The Guardians finished third place in the division this past year, and I'm always terrified of the Guardians. And maybe that's an era thing, just because the Guardians were the team that when I was I in college? For a little, maybe it was end of high school, we would have still been pretty decent for me. That would have been like just like 2016 was like barely missing the playoffs and whatnot. It was definitely like my college years were the Tigers just consistently getting their teeth kicked in by the Cleveland Guardians over and over and over and over again. And they have built a product which is not necessarily playoff sustainable, but they very much believe in the randomness, we'll call it, for lack of a better term. If you don't like that term, sorry. If you can think of a better one, I'm all ears, of the MLB postseason. And their mindset it's similar to what the Cardinals have become in like the post Pujols era, right? It's like, okay, we're going to build something that is going to, and obviously the Cardinals were terrible last year, but like, we're going to build something that gets us to the playoffs. And then like playoffs is just a crapshoot anyway. So whatever happens, happens. And that is very much the Guardians' mindset year in and year out. We're going to build something. The guards are going to consistently be competitive. They're going to be a team that's around 500. And if they go on a 2-week long, hot streak in June, well, then that's the difference. And they'll be an 88 to 90 win team and they can win a week division. And then we'll just see what happens in the postseason. J-Ram is obviously one of the most notorious Tigers killers ever, certainly in my lifetime, right? He's up there with, there's a few names, I guess we could just have a whole episode of just Tigers killers. That would be kind of fun. All right. I think the first one I ever like really realized was Jim Tomei growing up. He was the first one that I was ever like, this dude, and Jim Tomei, Hall of Famer, like maybe that's not even really fair. But the other one when I was younger, this is probably like middle school, was Billy Butler, Kansas City Royals. Did not have a very long and illustrious career, but felt like he always destroyed the Tigers. Anyway, J-Ram, fantastic player. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the entire game of baseball. He's one of the best third basemen in the entire game of baseball. I love J-Ram. I know I'm supposed to like hate the Guardians and we're rivals, whatever. I can't not love J-Ram. Obviously had a really, really, we'll call it notorious, knockout caliber moment in 2023 that I'm sure plenty of people remember. But yeah, man, he's the man, and he is going to show up. The big thing and the big question surrounding the Guardians year in and year out, we'll talk about this, we'll finish this thought on the other side of the break here, is do they have enough offense to get over the hump and win this division? That's the question literally every year. Okay, so we will continue talking about that right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in as always. So, talking about the Guardians here, the big question is always offense. J-Ram's going to show up, and I've talked at length over my 2.5 years as host of this show about how jealous I am is probably the word of their pitching factory they have over there. I know that again, the team wasn't fantastic this past season, and the Tigers did better than them finally in a season, but do not get it twisted. This team still has pitching for days, and they are going to be healthier. They continue to just develop guys that aren't top 100 prospects, that aren't super legitimate high-end arms with a ton, throw 100 and have all the flash and flare, and just get them to be ridiculously consistent and valuable and just like solid pitchers. If there is any organization outside of the Dodgers, probably, that I would trust to turn any prospect into just a solid like 3 in a rotation, it would be the Cleveland Guardians. And they had some big guys like step forward this past season as well on the mound. And yeah, I think that the Guardians are going to be in the picture. They're going to be in the picture. Their pitching's always good enough. Clase in the bullpen, one of the best closers in baseball, et cetera, et cetera. The big question is going to be offense. And again, I know the pitching wasn't maybe as good as it usually is this past season, but I really don't care. They're going to figure it out, and they're going to be fine in that regard. And another offseason of not very much spending in Cleveland, and that's become tradition at this point, right? Every year they don't really spend very much money, and so they are just going to rely on the development of their prospects. They're going to rely on some rebound years from some people that were really good 2 years ago when they won the division and then took some steps back this year. Stephen Kwan won. Really like Kwan a lot. He's kind of a dominate the strike zone guy from a like I don't strike out perspective, more so than I draw a boatload of walks perspective, but certainly can do that as well. Just a team that is always on my radar, and whether they finish 5 games or 7 games under 500, or whether they finish 5, 7, 10 games over 500, is always going to be somewhere between that like mid 70s to mid 80s win total. And I really don't think that this year is going to be any different. So continue to be on my radar. And then the biggest one that everybody wants to compare is the Minnesota Twins. The Minnesota Twins obviously won the American League Central in 2023. This is the hardest one for me because last season, if you're a longtime listener, when PECOTA releases their projections every year, we have an entire episode where we just break down the PECOTA projections. It's always really fun. It's something that we do every year here. And that's, oh, wow, we're probably getting relatively close. I think that's usually end of January, early February. So I think that the Twins are someone who I didn't really believe in last year. And watching them, they won the division for sure. And I'm not trying to take away from them. I'm not trying to like start a fight or talk smack to any, Twins fans. I watched them and I didn't believe in them more at the end of the year just because they ended up winning the division. My prediction going into the year was that Cleveland was going to win the division, some combination of Tigers 2 and Twins 3. I think I said Twins 2, Tigers 3, but I can't really remember. Some combination of those two. Talked about how the White Sox could, win the division or lose 100, and neither would surprise me, and then the Royals were going to be bad. This year is, I guess I believe in the floor of the Twins a little bit more. Like, I don't think the Twins are going to be some terrible team that's going to be at the bottom of the league or bottom of the division. I would be shocked if they were worse than the White Sox and the Royals this year. But they could absolutely finish third. This is a very inconsistent team offensively that just lost maybe their best pitcher, inarguably one of their 2 best pitchers. And they also have maybe the best closer in baseball, right? They also have a good back end of the bullpen. They have pitching starting pitching depth. They have, Pablo Lopez certainly is going to be a big focal point of that team this year now that Sonny Gray is gone. Joe Ryan always gives the Tigers fits, throws like 80% four-seam fastballs, and the Tigers still can't do anything about it because of how well he locates them all. And I love Joe Ryan for that reason. Like they have some pitching depth here, but I mean, they haven't really done anything huge this offseason either. They're one of the teams that going into the offseason notoriously was very vocal about how they wanted to shed payroll. And for as much heat as everybody gives the previous regime for signing Javi Baez, not saying that you shouldn't, okay? You can understand that Javi Baez's contract has been a catastrophic failure while also realizing that Carlos Correa has grossly underperformed. You can do both, I promise. I don't know why this fan base thinks that that's impossible. It's like Correa did not have a very good year. He was a sub-league average hitter. His OPS was barely over 700. Still had some value defensively and whatnot, but he led all of baseball in grounding into double play. He had a weird launch angle thing. I think there's serious concerns about his health long term, which is why he went through the whole brouhaha 2 off seasons ago, right, where he was signing with a different team every week, and then the doctors would say, no, don't do it. And I think that we're starting to see the fruition of that. So they're paying a lot of money to a guy who I think there's serious questions about whether he's the legitimate like 2 or 3 hitter of this team going forward. And I expect Correa to be better than, he had like a 710 or a 711 OPS. I don't expect him to be that bad again. But he was a like 1.5 R-WAR, I want to say, on Baseball Reference. He was a 1.4 win season. They're going to need a lot more out of him. And there's some inconsistency offensively. There's some guys that had some really hot stretches and then were really cold at times. And then, like I said, losing Sonny Gray is obviously a big thing. So I don't know, man. I'm not trying to come off as a like Twins hater. I guess I'm more just trying to say that I don't think there's any team in this division, Tigers included, obviously, that is geared up to like, oh, this is the clear favorite of the American League Central in 2024. I don't think that exists. I think that this is going to be a complete bleep show, to be completely honest with you. That's really how I feel about the Central. The Tigers standing is I would hope going to be somewhere between first and third. There's a lot of people in the Twins community, we'll say, that are rather, I don't want to say worried because I don't want to put words in people's mouth, but have their eyes on the Tigers as somebody as a team who could make a run at the Central this year. And like I said, the Tigers, when looking around this division, you look at quantity of moves. And I mean, you can throw quality in there too, have made a majority of the moves in the American League Central. Like a majority, like by definition. The White Sox have done little to nothing, especially as far as additions go. The Twins have done very little. The Guardians never spend, still haven't really spent. There's been some, between the margins, smaller moves, obviously. I'm not trying to make it sound like they've literally made 0 moves, but the Tigers have, and the Royals, for whatever that's worth to you, have been at the forefront of adding legitimate starting caliber major league talent. And for the Tigers already being the second place team in the division this past year, finishing just under 500, I think that's a good look for the Tigers. So I don't know what. Well, again, when we get closer to the season, we still have quite a bit of offseason to go. Once we get closer to opening day, we'll start doing like actual concrete predictions for the Central, predictions for the Tigers, etc. We're going to do player previews when spring training, as we get closer to spring training and all that. So we'll certainly have a lot more, like concrete and firm discussions about that as we get closer to the season. But for now, I think it's a 3-headed race. I think it's a 3-team race. I think the Tigers absolutely could be in it. I think that they should be in it. That's a big thing for me. It's one thing to think, oh, like they can, whatever. I think they should. I think they absolutely, the Tigers should be in the American League Central race. Does that mean that I think they're definitely the favorite? Absolutely not. I wouldn't have them as the favorite. But does that mean that I think there's no chance that they do? No. Also, absolutely not. They should be in the mix. They should be in the mix for the American League Central well into the season. They should. As far as the future of the division goes, we'll see what happens with the Royals. There's still a lot of uh, just question marks surrounding that franchise. They'd have to show me a lot more before I am like confident they're ever going to get out of the bottom of the division here. The White Sox are entering a rebuild. They're certainly not going anywhere anytime soon. The Guardians are going to consistently be again around that mid 70s to mid 80s win total. Just depends on any given year. It could be something slightly different. And then the Twins, as they stand right now, I'm confident are going to be in the mix. But I don't know, man. You fast forward a couple years down the road, there's a lot of money that's promised to guys that have not consistently played baseball or been healthy. And I think that that's a big concern for them. And that's why that they're not going out there and spending a ton of money this offseason. So we will see what happens with the Twins. I think, again, this year, they absolutely could win the division again. But I think there's serious questions about the next 3 years of Minnesota Twins baseball. I think it's very, very reasonable to kind of call that into question. So we'll see what happens. But this is an obtainable thing. This is something the Tigers could absolutely be in the mix on, and we will see. We will see. Any of these teams could also just randomly have a everything's clicking and going right season too. That certainly has happened before. The Guardians, again, in 2021, were like a really solid team and won the division and were more of a force. So I really do think it's a three-headed monster, and then kind of the two teams at the bottom. I'm just talking in circles at this point. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will be back on Wednesday. I appreciate you all greatly for tuning in. Happy New Year, everybody. I genuinely could not be any more grateful. I do not take for granted a single second of being a part of your day every day. I guess that's kind of how I view this. You voluntarily choose to allow me, some random idiot, to be a part of your routine, whether it's your morning routine, your way home from work, while you're eating breakfast, whatever, while you're working out, whatever it may be. You allow me to be a part of your day. And another year of doing that is truly an honor, is how I would word it. So I appreciate you all greatly. Thank you so much for the support. Yeah, dream come true for yours truly. This is all I've ever wanted to do, and you allow me to do it. So thank you very much. Like I said, always in the back of my mind. I genuinely never take it for granted. You're all incredible people, and I hope you have an incredible 2024. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all Wednesday, baby. Go Tigers.